You might think I've lost it by the time I finish telling you this, but I promise it's the truth. I just need to get it off my chest. It's been eating away at me. Maybe sharing it will help me finally get some peace. There was blood under the bed. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The room was dim, lit only by a single candle on the dresser. I crouched down, slowly, thinking maybe I'd spilled something and hadn't noticed. But when I leaned closer, I saw the dark stain wasn't just on the floor, it was pooling. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it wasn't just blood. There was something else under the bed, something breathing. You know, I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. But when Amaka asked me, when my mother begged me, how could I say no? We were poor and this wedding was supposed to save us. Chief Obinna was a rich man, one of the wealthiest men in the state, and Amaka was marrying him. She was going to lift our family out of poverty, they said. Bring us all a better life. It's funny how nobody questioned why someone as rich as Chief Obinna would come all the way to our small, dusty village for a wife. I don't know what he saw in Amaka, but once he'd chosen her, it was as if the whole family was under a spell. Everyone was so happy, so proud. Until the night before the wedding. That's when Amaka got sick. She was throwing up, sweating, too weak to even stand. I've never seen her like that before. The herbalist said it must have been something she ate. My mother was frantic. We can't cancel the wedding, she kept saying. The whole village will laugh at us. It will shame our family forever. Amaka grabbed my hand with a strength I didn't know she had. Her voice was shaky, desperate. Ada, she said, you have to do it. I thought she was joking at first, but her grip tightened. Just for a few days, she said. Pretend to be me until I get better. Wear the veil, say the vows. Obinna won't even know, please. I wanted to say no. God knows I wanted to say no, but my mother was crying, Amaka was begging, and I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to be the selfish one, so I said yes. The next day, I wore Amaka's dress and stood at the altar in her place. My face was covered with a thick veil, and I barely spoke during the ceremony. Chief Obinna didn't seem to care. He smiled at me with his cold, thin-lipped smile and said, "You're mine now." When we arrived at his mansion later that evening, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The house was enormous, bigger than anything I'd ever seen, but it wasn't welcoming. The air felt heavy, like the walls were pressing in on me. The servants were quiet, almost too quiet. They avoided looking me in the eye. One of them, a young maid with wide, frightened eyes, whispered to me as she set my things down. "Be careful," she said. That was all. I tried to ask her what she meant, but she hurried out of the room before I could get another word out. That first night was horrible. I couldn't sleep. The bed was too big, the room too dark, and the silence. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet. It felt like the house itself was listening, waiting. Around midnight, I heard faint noises, a soft creak like someone walking down the hallway. At first, I thought it was one of the servants, but when I peeked out of the door, the hallway was empty. I told myself it was nothing, just my nerves. But the noises didn't stop. Over the next few days, I kept hearing strange things. Footsteps in the middle of the night, doors creaking open and closing on their own. Sometimes I'd catch a shadow moving out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there'd be nothing there. The worst part was Chief Obinna. He was polite, even kind, during the day. But at night, there was something about him that felt wrong. His eyes would linger on me for just a second too long, and his smile never reached his eyes. One morning, he gave me a list of rules. "There are parts of the house you must not enter," he said, handing me a folded piece of paper. His voice was calm, but his tone left no room for argument. "For your own safety." When I opened the paper, I saw a list of rooms, all locked. I wanted to ask why, but something about the way he looked at me made the words stick in my throat. Then came the fifth night. I'd been sitting in my room, trying to calm myself down, when I realized I'd dropped one of my earrings. I looked around but couldn't find it, so I got down on my hands and knees to check under the bed. That's when I saw the blood. At first, I thought it was just a dark stain on the floorboards, but then I realized it was fresh, still wet, and it was spreading. I froze. Then I saw the woman. She was curled up under the bed, her back to me. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and she was so thin I could see the outline of her bones. She was breathing in these shallow, ragged gasps, like every breath was a struggle. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. Then she turned her head. Her eyes, oh God, her eyes. They were wide, bloodshot, filled with terror. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I don't know if she was trying to speak or scream, but it didn't matter. I scrambled back, my heart racing. But before I could do anything, the door slammed open, and there he was, Chief Obinna. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked annoyed. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. I pointed at the bed, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "She's none of your concern," he said, stepping closer. "You're my wife now. You'll learn to follow the rules." I don't remember how I got through the rest of that night. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. I just sat there, shaking, waiting for morning to come. The next day, I tried to leave. I told Chief Obinna I needed to go back to my family, that I was worried about Amaka. He just smiled and said, "You're not going anywhere." It was like the house became a prison. The doors were locked, the windows barred. The servants avoided me completely now, their faces pale with fear. I knew I had to escape, but I didn't know how. Then, on the 7th night, I heard something, whispers, faint and desperate, coming from the direction of one of the locked rooms. It was her, the woman under the bed. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and forced the lock open. What I found in that room, I can't even describe it. The walls were covered in strange symbols, painted in what I can only assume was blood. There was a chair in the center of the room, with chains dangling from the arms and legs, and in the corner, barely alive, was another woman. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Run," she whispered. "He'll kill you too." I didn't wait to find out what she meant. I ran. I don't know how I made it out of that house. I just remember running until my legs gave out, until I collapsed on the road outside the village. When I told my family what happened, they didn't believe me at first. But Amaka knew. She'd seen something too. That's why she got sick. That's why she wanted me to take her place. I've never forgiven her for that. And Chief Obinna? He's still out there, still looking for his next wife. If you ever hear stories about men like him, don't ignore them. And whatever you do, don't go near that house. Some secrets are better left buried.